Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk about inflation and really terrible tweets. Inflation silver lining, higher salaries. Occasionally, you think that the media can't get any stupider. Journalists could not be any dumber. And then you read a tweet like this. Inflation's good because salaries go up. This is, by the way, I actually don't think this is pure idiocy. I think this is really trying to spin something to make the current Democrat administration look good. It's like we have to tell people that inflation's good. Inflation's good now, guys. To the credit of CNBC, that is not the actual headline. The actual headline is, it's not certain rising wages will be enough to outpace inflation. This is really why inflation is bad. It's because prices can be very fluid for lots of the products that you buy, but your salary is not very fluid. It's what's called a sticky price. Wages are sticky, meaning it's difficult to increase your wages in a timely enough fashion to match inflation. So the price of your groceries goes up, but it takes you a month to get your salary higher. You have to go negotiate with your employer. Hey, I really need more money. Inflation's hitting us. And so maybe your next paycheck next month is a little higher. The problem is you still have to pay the increased price of goods this month. And then next month, the goods are even more expensive. And yet your salary is still not covering it. So it's really hard to outpace inflation with wages. Wages are sticky. And this is why inflationary periods are very bad for wage earners, because you are getting less value for your money. You're buying less stuff for the same amount of money in a couple of different ways, but you're always buying less stuff for the same amount of money. And it's pretty much going to happen as long as the inflationary period exists, until the inflation is over and your wages are actually able to match prices. And then you're going to have a slight increase in your buying power, and you're going to have a consistent ability to take your money and get a certain amount of goods with it. Now, inflation actually takes two different forms. The first one is rising prices. The other one is the prices may stay the same for a good, but you get less. So it used to be here in the U.S., you could buy a half-gallon carton of ice cream, about 2 liters, let's say. So maybe 2 liters where you're at. Well, now that carton of ice cream is 1.75 quarts. Now, it still costs $3.99 for your carton of vanilla ice cream, but you get less in it. And it continues to go down to where now I pick up a carton and it's 1.5 quarts. And pretty soon it's going to be 1.25 quarts. And it'll still cost $3.99. Now, that's an increase in the price of ice cream, even though ice cream still costs $3.99. Well, you're getting less ice cream. So you're getting less goods for the same amount of money. It would be like if you went there and they were pricing, apples are still 99 cents. Well, it's 99 cents for a half pound. Why did they start measuring it in a half pound? Well, they wanted to raise the price without you psychologically feeling like you're losing more money. But you are going to be paying more money for the same amount of goods. Now, is this article good? It's not the worst article, but it's clear to me Jessica Dickler here actually, and there's actually some standard journal problems here. She doesn't understand where inflation comes from. To quote Milton Friedman, inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. That is to say, inflation is the result of printing money. It's the result of an increase in the money supply. Now, if you don't know who Milton Friedman was, very famous economist, famous for his Republican or libertarian views, and also famous for the quantitative theory of money, which basically stated that money supply is cash plus deposits. That is to say, the numbers in your bank account are traded as if they're money, therefore they are money. And this is really important, especially now where there's a big disconnect between the physical amount of money that is being printed and the amount of money that's being traded as deposits. And if you're wondering how this works, I'll give you a super short explanation. It has to do with the transactions that happen between banks that increase the supply of money. Bankers would probably say, I don't print money, but they actually do, but it has to do with the fractional reserve system. So if you take 10 physical dollars, you give it to a bank, they credit your account for $10, they put $1 in reserve and they loan out $9. So their bank sheet, they've actually just basically created an extra $9, because that $9 then goes into another bank because someone gets paid somewhere for doing work to get the $9. The cycle continues again. That they put $1 in reserve, they loan out $8, So you end up getting like $100 of deposits for every $10 of physical currency that gets deposited into a bank. And those deposits are traded as money. When you go and you swipe your debit card, you're trading a deposit. When you write a check, you're trading a deposit. So that money actually doesn't exist. It's pretend money. but you treat it like money, therefore it is money and it's part of the money supply. And so nowadays, the way that the money supply is increased is not by the Federal Reserve going down to the printing press and like printing off lots of extra dollars and just like throwing them out to banks, but they just credit the account of member banks. So banks which is pretty much all banks, if they need a loan from the Federal Reserve just says, we credit your account. Boom, boom, here's some numbers. They do the same thing with the government. So for the government to pay its employees and all the other crap that the government does during a given year, they will sell treasury bonds. Now, they can sell treasury bonds to you, but who do they sell them to a lot? The Federal Reserve itself. The banking arm of the government will then just credit the account of the government. It's like taking money from one hand and putting it in the other and being like, look, we have financed the government without printing money. We just took on debt. So this is part of the illusion of the national debt, is that a big portion of the debt is simply the form of printing money, because the Federal Reserve, quote, monetizes the debt. That is, they print money to buy Federal Reserve bonds. So that printed money eventually goes out into the economy because the government spends it. Money goes out there, there's more money, things are worth less because there's more dollars, right? Each dollar is worth less because there's more dollars in the economy, which means the price of goods has to go up to compensate for that. You don't magically keep your price of goods low if everybody suddenly has a ton of money to come in and buy out your stuff. You have to raise prices. And because the prices of what you're buying are going up, you really have to raise the prices of what you're doing, or you're going to be left out in the cold by inflation as well. Or you have to reduce the quantity of what you're selling for the same amount of money. So it's not shopkeepers that create inflation. It's also not things like gas prices going up that somehow have a rippling effect through the economy. There's counterexamples to that, not just in the 70s with like the OPEC crisis, but in that big gas crunch that happened right after Obama got elected, where the price went up to like $5 a gallon in like 2008 money. What happened is people adjusted the way that they used gas, and then the gas prices fell back down, and they permanently adjusted the way that they used gas. So it really prolonged the effect of inflation on the cost of gas for a really, really long time because of the change of habits. And people are continuing to evolve their the way that they use gas and how they conserve gas. But gas is the one thing that probably could have an effect on a lot of prices, because you're using diesel to transport lumber, to transport groceries, transport everything. Our economy runs on gas. It runs on fuel, fossil fuel. So if the cost of fossil fuel goes up, it stands to reason that it's going to harm the economy and raise prices. But the prices won't just magically go up because there's not extra money to pay that. What happens is the economy will suffer as a result. There'll be less trade. Okay, so rising gas prices do not cause inflation. Inflation is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. And here's one of the problems about this little article. And still, some economists, which economists? This is a standard journo tactic. Some economists say this. Which ones? The economist I quoted was Milton Friedman. Some economists fear a too rapid increase in wages could prompt companies to raise prices and create the very phenomenon of inflation, causing more harm than good. This is one of the dumbest things I've read in an economics article ever. This is the exact backwards way that it works. Wage earners have to ask their employers for more money because they're having to pay more money for goods and services. Okay? They're having to pay more for strawberries. They have to ask their employer for it. It's completely backwards. So no, you don't just raise wages in an inflationary period for no reason. Workers don't just, my salary went up. No, you have to negotiate with the employer, whether that's through a collective bargaining agreement with the union or as an individual saying, hey, boss, I need a raise. The dollar just doesn't go as far as it used to. So I'm going to need a raise there. So this is just another example of how journalistic articles work. Some economists, which economists? This person could have just made that up for all we know, or found some retarded economist who doesn't know anything is going to say that. You could find somebody somewhere who's going to say something that's what you want them to say, no matter how completely stupid it is and the opposite of mathematical sense. So yeah, that's inflation. Now, I want to say, which one's better? Which one would you rather have? Prices go up or quantity of goods for the same price goes down? I think the latter is actually something that's preferable. A lot of people throw a lot of flack at companies for, like, again, reducing the size of ice cream, so, from 2 quarts down to 1.5 quarts or whatever it is. But with something like ice cream, which is a luxury good, you probably don't need to be eating more ice cream. It's a way that kind of fluidly makes you consume less of the good for the same amount of money. So rather than having to pay more for ice cream and maybe not having ice cream at all, ice cream comes in a smaller quantity that you can still afford in the inflationary period. So I think it's actually better if companies reduce the size, the weight of their product. If soda cans, let me see, I have a soda can here. If they go from 12 fluid ounces to 11.5 fluid ounces, that last fluid ounce of the soda is never that great anyway, right? So maybe it's okay if it's 11.5 fluid ounces. It gets you to reduce your consumption without making you have to, say, completely give up ice cream or something like that. So it's an easier way that will reduce the consumption of people. But it still is, they're still getting less for the same amount of money, and it still is overall going to have a kind of suppressive effect on people's ability to spend and enjoy consuming goods in general. So there's that. There's the inflation. Don't believe anybody that says it's like shopkeepers that create inflation. That is absolute nonsense. It's everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. It's just supply and demand in the realm of money, and in this case, deposit money, and that's what it is. So inflation bad? No, it's not good because your wages go up. Your wages are going to go up after you've already paid more money for your groceries. That's the way things tend to work. Are we in a really extreme inflationary period? I don't think we are yet, but I can tell a lot of people in certain markets are really hurting. And I noticed that it's primarily in urban areas. People are really complaining about the grocery prices in urban areas, whereas my groceries really haven't gotten more expensive. But I live in a rural farming area, so produce here is generally going to be cheaper than anywhere else because it's like grown next door. It's grown across the street. I can go across the street and pick fruit. I couldn't do that because that would be stealing from my neighbor. But, the fruit is grown within 100 feet of my house. Obviously, it's going to cost less to deliver it to me. And you get a bunch of benefits by living near the food supply. So anyway, but that's something that I thought I would talk about. I think it's more journalists are not stupid. Rather, they want to spin things in a way that look good for the Biden administration because they're fans of Biden. Okay, so thanks so much, guys, and I will see you all next time. Leaving your thoughts down below on inflation or whatever else, and I'll see you next time.